Hi, I'm Wendy from Shiny Happy World, and in this video I'm going to show you how to assemble these easy cattail blocks. Here's how to do it. Okay, this is the video showing how to assemble the cattails half block if you do not have a light box or are not using a light box. So I've got all of my pieces prepared, and just to show you what that means, I printed the designs, all the templates, onto the back side of paper-backed fusible adhesive onto the paper side. I use Heat and Bond Light for all of my quilts. I did a rough cut around each piece, fused it to the back side of the fabric, and then did a nice clean cut on all of the straight lines. The dotted lines, I'm sorry, on all of the solid lines. The dotted lines that are inside the piece, you need to transfer to the fabric side of each piece. These are placement guides that will show you where some pieces overlap the others. Some applique pieces overlap these. You actually don't need to do that. You can totally improv, put this block together, but use those guidelines if you want to design it, if you want your block to look exactly like my sample. So I've got two different cattails that I designed that are leaning in different directions that are slightly different. I mean, all cattails pretty much look the same, but they are a little bit different. What I'm going to do here is the piece that has the numbers on the pieces. The other piece, the other version has letters on the piece. So we're working with the numbers here, and this is a guide to show you what the final pieces are going to look like, again, if you do it just like the one that I'm doing. So I'm just going to lay this over to the side, and we're going to start with piece number 1. I'm going to move this up just a little bit here so you can see the bottom edge of the block. So I designed these to be able to use either way. So you can either float them in the middle of the block, or you can have them kind of growing out of your seam allowance down here. I'm actually going to float these in, well, you know what, I'm going to make them grow out of the bottom here. So I've got, the first one kind of goes a little bit off to the side. It's not exactly centered. So this is the stalk that has the actual cattail on it. So that was piece number 1. Piece number 2 is the cattail. And I've got markings here and here that show you where this gets put on here. But again, you really can play around with this to give it a little bit of variety. So you could do a quilt that has a whole bunch of different cattails in it, and each of them look a little bit different, just mixing and matching the pieces from this pattern. So next up, I'm going to do piece number 3. So piece number 3, if you're referencing your placement guide, is the one that goes a little bit over to the side here, and it overlaps that center stalk on the cattail just a little bit. So we are going to do that. I've got a little chalk line here showing where it overlaps, and I'm just going to position it on there. And as soon as I've got that chalk covered up, I know I'm good. All right, and then piece number 4 is the tall stalk here. It's the tallest leaf in this layout, and I've got a little chalk line there that I'm going to cover up. And then I have one more piece, piece number 5, that is going to cover up that last chalk line. All right, and that, I'm going to shift actually the whole thing over a little bit. I put it too far off center. I'm going to trim this block down to size. Right now this block is 6 inches wide, and I'm going to trim it down to 5.5 inches wide so that when I sew it, all my blocks together, and use 1/4 inch seam allowance, it'll finish at 5 inches wide and 10 inches tall, and that way it'll be exactly half the size of all of my square blocks, which are 10-inch squares. All right, that looks great. So now I'm going to fuse it in place, and this takes a little while. You need to follow the instructions on whatever brand of fusible adhesive you use. I use Heat and Bond Light. So I'm going to count and get this fused down, but I'm going to fast forward through a lot of it because it's slow. All right, so I'm going to let this cool, and then I'm going to take it over to my sewing machine and do all of the outline stitching, and then I'll bring it back here and show you the finished block and also show you the other cattails that I'm going to make. All right, here are both of my finished cattail blocks. I have one leaning a little bit to the right and one leaning a little bit to the left in order to have that variety in your quilt so you don't have all your cattails leaning in one direction. But I do want to just remind you that you can mix and match all of the pieces here to make a lot more clusters of cattails if you want that all look a little bit different. You can also, I designed these to fit on half blocks to use to break up a basic quilt pattern. I'm using these in my pond bundle to just kind of break things up and make that simple grid more interesting. But if you wanted to have just a simple square grid, you could put a couple of clusters of them in a single square block, and that would work as well. You could even do a double-size wide block and do a whole bunch of cattails. You could do a whole row all the way across the quilt just of cattails. So have fun playing with this. You can get it at shinyhappyworld.com. I'm Wendy, and I will see you next time.